Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video, and today we have an interesting one. This is actually kind of a follow-up video of a previous video that I made before, and I had a comment from, I don't know if they're a subscriber, but I had a comment from a viewer, and it brought up some really interesting points. Now, I believe the video was about Balisongs and the kind of trainers versus live blades versus false edges, and what's better for you as a flipper. And it brought up some interesting points that I'm just going to take the final comment that they used. I'm just going to reply a little bit to it because I think they brought up some interesting points. And it was essentially on the kind of the place that trainers have in the community, right? So, you know, a Balisong trainer, for those of you who aren't aware, is a Balisong like this, which the blade is essentially for training for use with a live blade, which a live blade obviously is one with an edge, and a trainer is something like this, where you can see there is no, distinguished edge. These are legal just about everywhere in the world. And you know, they are an awesome supplement for those of us who live in countries, or those of you, for people who live in countries where, acquiring a live blade is either illegal or difficult, or, you've got to get licenses or stuff like this. And so trainers were never previously accepted in the Balisong community, like quite a while ago. And I mean, I guess in more recent times, in the past kind of 10, 15 years, their adaptation has been more and more accepted, especially with the Balisong hobby becoming a little bit larger. And I mean, I guess they are a good starting place. Most people probably start, at least nowadays, on some sort of trainer or on some sort of cheap Chinese thing, right? My first exposure to Balisongs, other than films, so like an in-person one, was someone with a Balisong comb. And, or I think there was a switchblade comb. And I thought, that's kind of cool. I wonder if they do this in like Balisong form, right? Because I think Balisongs are a really cool idea. I should have brought my comb out, but it's in my case. And so this here is the Armed Shark Madco. This is a titanium bottle opener. So it actually does have a use other than just being, I guess, a practice butterfly knife. But there were some really interesting points, which is that these guys should not take the place of things like this and things like this. Where this is, this is a live blade of a Balisong, right? I'm not going to cut myself, but watch my previous video with ASMR of this guy. I did end up cutting a dandelion, like that. Now, one distinguish I should make is this live blade is not, it's not like razor sharp, but by no means is it dull. And so one point was that, if you're looking just for a safe skill toy hobby, there are other... Why can't I do a reverse 8-ball? There are other hobbies to get into, such as yo-yoing and kendama, and I think it's because I was lifting the Madco, and it's much heavier. It's like 15 grams heavier than this or something like that, and this is like so light. I'm just putting in so much momentum into it. There we go. Yeah, but anyways, like I was saying, is there are other hobbies like yo-yo and kendama which allow, well, not only, are they cheaper, so I guess they're a bit more inviting, but they have a, I'm not going to say similar, but they also have a kind of skill threshold where you need to invest a fair amount of time to be able to be any good at them, right? And so this is one of those things where I just thought, I guess that's a fairly valid point, but me personally, I think Balisongs are much cooler than, yo-yo or kendama, and I think that they hold a kind of unique place where there is a higher skill ceiling, I think. The skill threshold is, fairly similar. I mean, most people learn this trick as their first trick, right? Just this standard opening move, and they probably go on to some stuff that's like... Did I just wipe a bug off my... I think I did. Ew. That is gross. 1 second, guys. Oh. Sorry, it's the springtime. All the insects are coming out to play. But yeah, basically there are... What was I even saying before? People probably start off learning that kind of move, and then they move on to, rollovers of sorts, and then onto like chaplains and things like that, and ow. And so I think that the ceiling for Balisongs is definitely much higher, especially as there's, constantly tricks being made up every day. And so I personally think that, it being, don't bother doing Balisongs because there are other skill hobbies that are similar, that are safer, I don't think that argument holds too well, in terms of for people who aren't willing to do stuff with live Balisongs. However, I do think live Balisongs have a very important role to play, because I guess the whole point of the Balisong hobby is that it is people doing cool things with knives. And to be honest, that was a point that the viewer made. And I have no rebuttal for this, because I entirely agree. You know, doing stuff like this, right, where you get chaplains and all sorts of palm fans and, you know, things like, oh my goodness, it's so dangerous, like, wow. You know, stuff like this, it's really cool because I guess there is a slight element of danger. And that is, I guess, what entices a lot of people into the Balisong hobby, where you see, like, oh my goodness, this is a real knife, like, you know, I don't have anything to cut here, but this is, you know, it's got a proper edge on it. I do use this knife as a knife. You know, I'm not cutting like bricks or anything with it. Obviously, that's not what knives are for. But, you know, you do the odd cutting that I do around with one of these knives, right? I was working on my car and I had this in my pocket because it was useful for cutting things off that might need to be cut. And so they are genuinely a EDC tool, I guess. And especially in countries where you are allowed to carry them or own them, right? You know, there are, you know, not many of them, but there are a few countries where you're allowed to just walk around with these. These are a genuine tool that just happen to have this kind of element of, you know, flashy skillness, and this thing sounds so nice. Sorry, just a small ASMR break. But yeah, genuinely, I do entirely agree. This is totally about doing cool things with knives, like cool little tricks, which then leads you to kind of have people who can't get a hold of live blades and they resort to something like this, or people who simply don't want to injure themselves, right? Because, you know, it's quite intimidating, I would say, to start off with a live blade of sorts, because, I mean, dude, what if you do something like this and you cut yourself, right? Like, I only do that on my Tsunami, right? That like forced aerial, because look how I just caught that there. I don't know it well enough to not do this, catch it confidently, and not take my finger off, which is why you'll see the tricks that you do with a trainer are kind of different to the tricks that you do with a live blade, like right off the bat. And we'll get back to that later. But what happens is with people who don't bother flipping live blades, now we're going to assume that you can legally, or at least easily, get a hold of a live blade in some way, shape, or form. People end up building, but choosing not to. They choose to build collections of only trainers. And then that actually responds to also another good question that I've heard from a viewer, that what are you training for with the trainer, right? Because I guess this is a Balisong trainer. It is not a Balisong, because Balisong in and of itself is a knife. And, you know, that's one of the defining characteristics, is a knife concealed between two handles, which kind of fold out, right? So this is a Balisong trainer. This is just a really glorified bottle opener. It makes a cool noise, and I guess I could learn tricks, like, you know, practicing this, that like mega aerial. I used to do that on my Armshark Tsunami all the time. But, you know, stuff like that, or, you know, practicing tricks that you aren't, you know, super confident with, like, I mean, I say that, but I started learning some tricks on live blades, right? Like stuff like the Z choker, like, that's fairly low risk, but, you know, I guess to people, yeah, or like wrist pass, you know, for people doing this, you know, learning this might be better on a trainer, because you do genuinely, you don't injure yourself. But obviously a trainer, I mean, the worst thing that happens to me is like that nicks me, or that nicks me, or this nicks me somewhere. And I mean, these are all rounded edges, so whereas, no, it's not comfortable to do this to myself. You know, it does leave a bit of a mark. By no means is it as punishing as with a knife. And the one downside of trainers as well is that you end up getting a lot of people learning bad habits. Now, in most of the tutorial videos I see, it is kind of a, you know, make sure you do treat the live blade as a live blade, and make sure you treat the live edge as a live edge, and the safe edge as a safe edge, right? So this obviously does have a live edge and a safe edge, so there is no mistake that you can make with this. You catch it wrongly, you nick yourself. But this, you know, some people might just go, yeah, well, it doesn't really matter, right? Just pick it up and just do this. Now, I've actually seen someone do this exact thing, right? I'm going to reenact it out for you. Oh, yeah, wow, look at this. This is cool. And they just do this, right? Or they go like this. And then they go, oh, ow, and then they drop it. And then it's like, oh, and obviously Balisongs aren't exactly cheap. But, you know, you don't want someone doing this. And this was with a live blade, by the way. And a fairly sharp one at that. You know, and then you just get yourself, you know, lovely nicks on the side of your hand. Now, this can happen to anyone, really. If you've only had experience with trainers, or you don't associate the danger of playing with a knife with balisongs. And so you end up seeing people at conventions or group meetups or just in videos in general, people who pick up live blades for the first time, or people who flip any new balisong, the way they flip, if they are mainly flipping live blades versus if they flip trainers, my flipping is actually slightly different when I flip both of these. I mean, despite this being lighter, the skills I use are slightly different here. Ooh, that was a risky one. And you can see this I'm much more willing to drop than to try and save in a fall of some sort. Simply because, obviously, I know subconsciously there is nothing like a trainer, like a live blade. When you're flipping a trainer, right? There is really no substitute for having a live blade. Like, look at that. That catch was awful. I wouldn't have gone for that on the other one. Whereas if I were to do the same trick, in fact, I'll even just show you. Now, it's not something that I'm trying to purposefully master. I mean, I know it reasonably well. And I guess you could say that this balisong flips a little bit better, but I'm much more careful. You can see I'm catching even closer to the ends here when doing like an helix aerial. And this is a good point where, you know, you really can learn bad habits. For example, when I first learned the behind the 8-ball, I purposefully learnt on a trainer because this is a trick I wasn't super confident with. And when it comes to this orbit part of the trick, right, this behind the thumb thing, like this, right, you end up landing somewhere here, but with these fingers here, or I guess you could land like with, you end up landing with the bite handle coming towards your fingers here. Now, if you watch what I just did, I do this, like this, where it touches my hand, and then I roll out into a palm fan of some sort. Now, on the trainer, I mean, you can literally just do this at like full speed, right? Where if I do a behind the 8-ball, reverse behind the 8-ball, okay, just pretend I did that like 0G Chaplin, right? You can literally just slam this bite bit into your finger and just continue there, moving forwards, right? And there's no problem with that, you know? There's no punishment, I should say, for that, other than you should tell yourself, yeah, you shouldn't have done that, right? But if I were to do that with my serif here, now my serif does have a little bit of leeway. You can see here it's got quite a big sharpening choil, but if I slam that side of the knife into my hand, it does nick me, despite still being able to do something similar if I catch the right area. This is not a good habit to learn, which is why I have this whole, like, you know, if I bring the camera back, when I do it, I bring it up like this. Now this is because this motion here, I'm severely reducing the momentum of this blade coming at me. I do actually sometimes let the blade genuinely make contact with my finger, right? As you can see with the Tsunami that has a shorter choil. If I can even do the trick, mate, don't flip heavy knives and then flip light ones because it just comes out. Squiddy syndrome is so real. I should have chosen the lighter trainer, but like I genuinely do something like this, and the blade does make contact with my hand here. You can see here it does make gentle contact, and unless it has a really awful nick here for the choil, this is relatively fine. So you end up just looking at it just briefly, even on like a razor sharp blade. But also my skin is fairly calloused on the underside of my pinky, so it's a calculated poor technique, because there are other things that I can do to get around it. This obviously works for me, but it might not work for you. Someone with a trainer might just develop this and just be like, yeah, whatever. And then they pick up a really sharp knife and they just go whoosh, slamming their hand into something that isn't the spine. And Bob, this is your uncle, and you're bleeding now on someone else's knife or on a knife that you're renting, or, you know, your new knife, which is like pretty nuts. Because now you have an injury and now you probably can't even flip balisongs for a little while. Or you see something like that, right? Like even just that little simple move there. Like this here, the positioning here of my finger, the blade will probably get really close to actually where my finger is, but it won't make contact. Even when you do something like that, right? There are times where you need to learn how close can you get the blade to your hand. Also, this knife sounds like it's like crying, like a Star Wars character crying when you drop it and it's sad and it goes. It's really funny, but it's really sad as well. Like you can see there are times here, if you know what the combos are, where I am getting the blade awfully close to the point where, you know, you can kind of feel it on near your fingers, but it isn't making contact with them because obviously I've learned how to flip live blades. And I remember my first ever live blade, it was a Chab clone, and I did this, I think. I did, not that, I caught it, and you see that's the sound it makes, that. I did this, right? I did that move, but I didn't do it quite well, because when I did the helix bit, or maybe the end bit, the knife kind of just left my hand, and it went, oh, I guess it would have gone this way, and it just skimmed a little bit of my hand somewhere. I don't remember where, but like it skimmed a little bit of my hand somewhere, and it just went whooshing, and it just like shaved a little bit off to expose the nerve layer, which was like really painful afterwards. It wasn't like bleeding like a lot, but it was just painful. And this is something that, obviously, because I'd only practiced that with a trainer, it was my first live blade, and I'd just gone like full whack, slam on a thing, on a new knife. It's much heavier than anything I've flipped before, and it's much sharper. Well, it's sharp at all. And so this was a little mistake you make. The room for error is much more severe, which is why typically you see people don't do aerials that they aren't super confident with live blade balisongs if they haven't flipped them before. Right? If it's not their balisong, or they're trying out a new balisong. Whereas, obviously, with a trainer, there is no punishment. You can do, you know, these crazy aerials, and sure, you can catch them probably fine, and you can probably do the same on a live blade. Just you're risking your fingers a lot more. That's the right catch there. Or like doing a scissor, right? If I remember how to do a scissor, it's like this, right? Like catching a scissor like this on a trainer, it's much easier psychologically than on a live blade. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm not very good at scissors, right? But, you know, there you go. You see, I'm much more likely, if I'm not going to get the trick right. Okay, I did catch it there, but I let it go. So there is this subconscious kind of fear that it's not necessarily fear, it's more instinct. You don't want to injure yourself, right? I mean, this knife, it's not stupid sharp that it's going to, like, chop my finger off. But I don't want to get a cut and then not be able to flip for a couple of days, right, on an important finger, or right, or something like this. And so, for reasons like that, there is no substitute to a live blade when you really think about it. I mean, a false edge, it gets close, at least for the aerial stuff, where it could poke you out, but it doesn't obviously have a full edge on it. So, you know, there's stuff like that. I think that, weirdly enough, the closest thing I've found as a substitute is actually, like the comb trainers, because those combs really hurt when you nick yourself, but obviously they're not going to draw blood or anything. So, I have to say, there is no difference, there is no substitute really for flipping a live blade if all you flip is trainers. You know, as best technique as you can try until you flip an actual live blade and you realize, you know, this edge, it comes out quite far, and it doesn't have to get you very hard to necessarily nick you, and you've got to learn how to adjust to that. You'll probably never have flawless technique. And then one thing I learned of was people entering competitions or showing kind of, you know, new tech tricks or stuff like this. Now, if you are one in a country obviously that doesn't allow for live blades, or you just can't get a hold of one, then this obviously doesn't apply. This whole video doesn't apply to you. But if you're in a country where you can, and you have one, or you know you have access to them, and then you're entering competitions for balisong stuff with trainers to show off kind of technical skill, or you're making a post on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, I don't know, wherever people make posts of social media for balisong stuff, Reddit or whatever, right? You know, some people are making these posts and showing off, you know, cool technical tricks, like watch how I, like, I don't know, do like Spider-Man with this balisong, and it's with a trainer. And then this is like, okay, but when you're entering a competition and you're using a trainer, I think that is, I'm not going to say morally debatable, but I don't think it can be judged in the same category as someone flipping a live blade. Because again, it brings back this previous question, what are you training for? If you're training for the competition, use a live blade in the competition. It doesn't have to be super sharp, it can be working sharp, or it can even be dull. But a dull knife, unless you literally go and grind off the edge to a flat edge, is still going to cause you some damage if you catch it wrongly too fast or too hard, or if it's a heavy knife or something like this. And so I would say a dull knife is still better than a false edge or a trainer if you're thinking about purely technique. And I think for competitions, it should be a live blade, right? Only, at least for like places where they are legal, right? So like your American competitions or ones in certain countries in Europe, they should be like, yeah, I mean, if you're going to enter the competition, it has to be with a live blade. You don't have to prove that it's sharp, but it should be. You should show the edge, right? It should have a ground edge. That's just my personal opinion, I think. But for those of you who do use trainers and you're making new tricks and stuff like that, I still think it's super cool. I just don't think it's of the same factor when it comes to a competitive nature as one would be if flipping something like this, as opposed to something like this. You know, maybe if the trick was like the bottle opener where you go like, you know, and then you do like a cool parabolic aerial or something like this, and you go like that, and that's like you've opened 3 bottles, and that's something obviously you can't do on a live blade. But otherwise, I think that these guys should be, I mean, they should be trainers, right? You should be training for using one of these guys, because these are not only much cooler, but they also have some beautiful craftsmanship. I mean, look at the blade work. I mean, obviously it's a bit dirty, but obviously you can just wash that off. But like, you know, beautiful craftsmanship here that's happened. You know, obviously this is made in America. Made its way over here. It's one of like 3 in the country or 2 in the country. I think I only am aware of 1 or 2 other people in Britain, and maybe like 5 people in Europe that have serifs. They are difficult to come by, despite being a production knife. Obviously they are still done usually in drops, and they are for sale right now, and I really want another one. But Bali Plus is also making a clone, which I'll 100% be comparing to the real deal. Obviously I know what the difference is between the Opus blade and the standard blade, but if it's any good, I would love to have just a beta serif, which I could just flip everywhere, if it's anywhere near as good, right? I'll probably find some stainless washers lying around, chuck them in, because the Bali Plus washers we all know are going to just be awful, and give it a tune-up. And if I can get it anywhere near the real serif, I mean, that's just going to be super cool, especially if it's got the milling lines like the new blades have. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that. But that's basically just been this little talk about trainers versus live blades. What are you training for? But no, I will also give out the pros of trainers, because obviously I have been slamming them a little bit. 1, they are legal everywhere, which is a huge win. 2, they are essentially 95% of the fun of a Balisong, with like 0% of the downside. There is no risk to user. There is less utility, which I guess is kind of fun. You go like this, and you know, you go like and you chop some boxes up or something like this, or on a building site, you know, you whip out with the quick draw and you just, you know, cut some wire or something like this, and using the knife as a knife. But I guess you can add some alternate utility with this as a bottle opener. But obviously most trainers aren't bottle openers. But that's one of the cool things about the Madco. Which is why I wanted to pick one up. I really love the design. I like the shark thing, and I like that it's a trainer you can take everywhere. Yeah, you can carry these everywhere as well, which is really nice. Not the best idea, but you can. And they are good for learning tricks on, like new tricks that are dangerous, right? Like, I don't like learning brand new tricks on this guy because, well, if he nicks me, obviously if it's a simple trick that doesn't involve too much live blade shenanigans, obviously I will learn it on a real one. But like, you know, some stuff like this, I actually give this knife more leeway. Like, I'll learn more dangerous tricks on it, just because it flips a lot more predictably, a lot more kind of by itself, and I'm less likely to get it wrong, right? And that's just a very comfortable knife. But if it's like a trick where I'm like, okay, I have no clue, yeah, sure, I'll bring this guy out or the Orca trainer out, and I'll be like, yeah, let me actually take the time to properly learn it. And so I do think trainers are very useful, and they are super awesome in the community, and I don't think they should go away, but I still think live blades are probably king. I mean, they just look so much cooler, but it's doing cool things with knives, and that is kind of the summary of the Balisong hobby, at least in my opinion. You guys may disagree. Let me know if you have any other opposing views. Do I think you should be going chopping yourself up with a real Balisong? No. Do I think you're any lesser if you only flip trainers? No. Unless it's in a competitive stance. Then, in that case, if you are able to flip a live and choose not to, then if I were a judge, I would deduct points. But I'm just a guy on YouTube. And so, personally, I think trainers are awesome. I do like them. I own some, right? I'm not like one of those purists that like, live blade only, if you flip a trainer. Actually, I shouldn't put in the accent. That's really insensitive. But, you know, I'm not... Apologies to my American viewers. But, I mean, obviously, the most vocal minority is those in America. Well, I guess in English. Perhaps in other languages there are other more vocal minorities, but I'm not sure. But in English, it's definitely in America, because we've had 4 big English-speaking countries, one of which has fully legal Balisongs everywhere, where they are mostly manufactured now. So it would make sense that... Anyways, before I get myself done in for having strange views, but yeah, no, basically, flip what you like, really, but try get a live blade if you can, at least because they're cool. And if you're really a purist about technique, flipping a live blade does take you to another echelon of flipping Balisongs. And it opens up a whole lot more Balisongs, because there are so many trainers that are just rubbish, but the live blade versions are actually good, right? Like the Serif trainer is good, The Serif Live blade is so much better. So it's like this, right? Is it $200 better? Probably, because I think that's the price difference. But yeah, that's my little summary. Thank you guys for watching. This has been a very long video. I try not to make them this long, but I've been rambling on a little bit. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Leave a like, leave a comment, leave a subscribe, and peace.